Hello and welcome to another Pi Crowdcast. I'm Rick Tarosi, co-founder and general manager of Pi. I'll be your host today. Our guest today is Lynn Lee, the founder and CEO of Society Nine. Today we'll get three separate masterclasses from Lynn. One on how to do well with crowdfunding on Kickstarter, another with how to get media coverage for your startup without spending a dime, and finally, how to stay true to your brand and your mission as a startup to really drive your company forward. If this is your first time listening, we'd love it if you hit subscribe, maybe give us a like, and leave a comment about the content that we've created. Now, without any further delay, let's get into this Q&A with Lynn Lee of Societies.
So I know you've heard this story probably 100 million times, Rick.
I can always hear it again.
Hi everyone, my name's Lynn. I'm the founder of Society Nine. We're a modern women's boxing brand providing gear and sportswear to empower every woman's fight. This is our 5th year, so we've been around since about 2015, 2016. And I started the company because I used to be a boxing instructor. And one of the questions I would always ask from my female students, which my classes were usually 30 to 40 people, at least half were women. And they would always ask me, where can I find good gloves? Because here's what I'm wearing. And they'll pull them out and they're the bubblegum pink, Pepto-Bismol pink gloves. They're usually super low quality. And, they would show how big it was for them, couldn't close their fists. They would hurt their wrists in class. And I realized I didn't have a recommendation for them. I have super small hands. I used to have to double wrap my hands just to actually fit my hand in the cavity of the glove and then to actually close my hand into a fist inside the glove to punch. Because just putting my instructor hat on for a second, like safety and training is you don't want to be punching like this because that will break. There's so many little bones in your hand, it'll break. So the better that you can actually close your fists, the safer you'll be. So the irony in all of this and training is that just because you're wearing a glove does not de facto mean that you're safe or protected. Fit is actually incredibly critical. And so imagine women basically fitting their hands in gloves like this because the cavity is too big and there's all this room. That's a recipe for injury. So the more I heard this and the more I realized wow, I'm experiencing the injustice too. And I'm an instructor. I started noodling on the idea, doing my Google search, and really the noodling becomes obsession, right? That's how I feel like for a lot of founders, it starts with the fixation, then the obsession. And then that's when I realized I really want to try to figure this out. And luckily living in Portland, so many talented designers, started flipping the network, trying to find people who can actually draw and create or design products. So I had the idea and I knew from like an instructor standpoint what I saw was need, and I was a feedback channel. I was able to create a feedback loop. But yeah, so first product was a women's boxing glove. We launched that on Kickstarter in 2015. That's actually how we started as a company. Kickstarter was our coming out party. And we raised a little under $60,000 for that very first campaign, and that set us off. And we fulfilled all the orders the very beginning of 2016. So I'd like to say 2016 was our true first year in business, because until you ship your first order and the first customer gets the package, it's not really a real thing yet. So 2016 was our true first year in business, and then now here we are, year 5.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would have been wearing my Society Nine sweatshirt, but it's like 90 million degrees in here right now, and I wouldn't have survived. So you had this idea, you recognize the market opportunity. I think another thing I'd really love to hear you talk about is you also came with some additional knowledge about building startups, and that was your experience on kind of the venture capital accelerator fund side. How was that helpful to you as you started approaching this concept and trying to bring it to fruition?
Yeah, so I, full disclosure, and this is public because it's on my LinkedIn, which you can find me. I worked for Portland Seed Fund. I was their very first fund associate, which is a very, very oversimplified umbrella term for like doing a lot of the back office work, which was a great experience because I was privy to every single deal that Portland Seed Fund participated in. I got to see all the paperwork. I got to see all who was investing in what. I got to hear what was being negotiated, the skeletons in the closet, the messes, founder dissolution, founder breakups. I heard everything. So I think that experience taught me so much about what venture finance actually means and fundraising. Because I think for startups, for anyone really, not just any business owner, this idea of fundraising, I think there's a misperception that fundraising just means I need funding for my business. I just got to get in front of an investor. But the truth is like you actually have to ask yourself, are you philosophically willing to give up ownership of your company? So even if you take a small check from an investor, right, and you're still technically majority owner, it doesn't matter. There's a new voice at the table, and they're entitled to have a voice at that table. And you have a fiduciary responsibility to them to report, to share information, share ideas, respond if they ask you for financial reporting or whatever. You're required. So I feel like being in that position, I understood very early on that depending on what kind of business I wanted to build, there's no wrong approach, right? So some people will villainize, oh, like you want the VC route, that's such a dumb idea. You're going to lose your soul, or you're selling your business to the devil or whatever. And on the other side, there's the bootstrapping side, which isn't a terrible approach either, but it's also just managing that expectation of like things likely might be slower. And your time to market might also be slow. I mean, there's all these factors on both sides. And so I think once you as a founder can sink into what kind of reality you want for yourself and for the business and what philosophy you personally possess, because it's an ego check, right? That conversation is an ego check. So if you're fundamentally okay with the idea of sharing what's going on and making decisions with someone else, then yeah, fundraising, go for it. You should, because it only will help you speed up your time to market possibly sooner. And also unlock resources, right? Like, because the nice thing about getting angel investment or venture capital or whatever is like, yes, usually if you accept funding from any of those sources, it ends up being that they have deeper social networks that can help give you subject matter expertise that you couldn't easily necessarily find on your own. So, I think that it's a great avenue. On the other side, I've seen incredible founders in this town build multi-million-dollar businesses fully bootstrapped, which awesome. Both routes are possible. But it taught me about venture finance, which is a very unique lesson in economics that I wish undergrad business schools would teach and not MBA. I'm only realizing that some MBA classes are offering a venture finance class. Like Willamette has one, PSU has one, but they're both MBA classes. So, I was very fortunate that I learned this very early on in my professional career. I worked there when I was 23, 24. I started at Society Nine when I was 26. So, that I call it my entrepreneur in residence, honestly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, and to kind of shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about what I think is another mode of fundraising that is completely misunderstood, which is crowdfunding, right? Like I bring you in as a mentor to talk to folks who are considering crowdfunding, because I think there's this misconception of like, I put the thing out there and the crowd finds it and it's magic and it's funded and there's actually, I've always been impressed with your strategy about how you bring the crowd along to help build that. So can you talk a little bit about what crowdfunding is like and what that environment is like?
Yes, I can talk about it pre-pandemic, and now it's not post yet, so I can't say post-pandemic.
Mid-pandemic.
I was like, it's not. So pre-pandemic, crowdfunding, it's an awesome opportunity for a couple reasons. One, proof of demand. It's such a naked experience. That's what I like to describe it as. Your product, your business, it's out there and you can see demand like right there in front of your eyes, right? So if you're trying, let's say like you decided you want to fundraise from investors and they're like, come back to me when you can show proof of demand or whatever. Crowdfunding, boom. Great way to just answer that question very quickly. And it also demonstrates urgency, like how bad do people want it? Especially because you only have 30 days, right? I mean, there's other platforms you can use. I personally like Kickstarter because of the urgency that's like built in to the whole, like, you don't get funding if you don't hit it in 30 days. I think that urgency piece is really important. Because the truth is all the platforms, they take the same payment fees. So that's what you have to weigh out. So I think crowdfunding is really beneficial in that way. What, to your point that you said, Rick, is like, it's not set it and forget it, it's constant self-promotion. I don't mean self as in, I mean like for your product, your brand, your business brand, it's constant. So in 2015, when I launched it, I had no customers, right? No customers, like we didn't exist yet. The only people who knew about it, of course, was like our initial focus group, which was awesome. It was several hundred people. So I luckily kind of had like a street team, so to speak, of women who were already ready to be like, check this out, there's finally a glove for us, which is awesome. I mean, that's a great way to address your crowdfunding strategy, is like, who's your street team? That's going to help you, because even if they don't pledge, because like that's the thing, right? Everyone's going to put their oxygen mask on first, and that's more resonant now than ever, obviously. But at that time, if you don't have the money to pledge, that's okay. But like, if Jane Doe shares it with her Facebook group, okay, she's an influencer, but she's got 500 Facebook friends, of whom are like close family members who trust what she says, or people in her community, at her church, at her gym, whatever. And they're like, oh, Jane's, what did Jane just share? Click. Ooh, that's cool. Yeah, I want to back. You know what I mean? Like, that circle of trust is much more powerful. So that's what we luckily had early on, is that little army. And so I think and then the third piece, I should say, is like for us in the back end, and it was just me at that time, keep in mind, it was a constant emailing, Facebook messaging, hey, I've got this dream. I just started it. Here it is. Would you be willing to throw your coffee change at it? I would be so grateful. It was constant. I started keeping track. I think I sent maybe like 3,000 emails for that campaign, between like press, like cold press outreach, to bloggers, to professional fighters, it was relentless. Especially because, again, I had like we didn't have a network yet. We didn't have a brand, we didn't have a customer base. Fast forward now 5 years later, we're literally in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign right now. There's 7 days left. And it's for a product that we spent 2 years developing. We were supposed to launch in March. Then the world changed. And, we worked hard for 3 to 4 months to prep for that launch. We were supposed to launch March 18th. Literally I was in New York March 6th for a press interview. I flew back and I told my team, I was like, something feels weird in the city, and I can't pinpoint what it is. But I was like, the flight home was weird. People were extra paranoid. Nothing had really cleared out yet. Like, the subway was still busy as can be and stuff, but there was just this like the extra spritzing. You were seeing more face masks, which again, in American culture, is such a judgmental thing. But the fact that people wearing face masks, paranoia, and all that stuff, I was like, I just feel like something bad's going to happen. So I actually came back. I said to my team, guys, I know we plan to launch next week. I think we're going to have to cancel. Like, we're going to have to postpone everything. So literally 1 week from when I came back home to Portland, the governor's order to close restaurants was like March 16th or whatever. And I was like, this is what I had a feeling was going to happen. So that happened. And for us, that 1 week that I bought in time to tell my team, we need to like run the other way and prep for a doomsday scenario where Society Nine doesn't exist at the end of 2020. We need to backtrack and say, if that's the worst case scenario, okay, what's the second worst case scenario? And then what's the mid case? We went into scenario planning. We started looking at our cash flow, inventory on hand. Like, we were in full recon, like what is going to happen if Society Nine just, and this is after spending 2 years developing this shoe, working so hard, spending so much money on visual assets and stuff. And I mean, I'm telling you, Rick, like it's only just maybe last week that I'm feeling any sense of, I don't want to say normal flow because that would be just, nothing's normal, right? But it's like any sense of flow back to life again. I only just felt maybe end of last week, because the 8 weeks prior to that was all that contingency planning. And then separate from that, dealing with banks, dealing with our landlord, dealing with our vendors, and just seeing who's kind enough to let us like kick the can on, payments that were due, negotiating for net 30, net 60 terms even, talking to our landlord and just being like, real talk, it is not to your benefit to evict us in a worst case scenario. So let's talk about all options, right? And those conversations took 3 to 4 weeks intensely of my life, them asking for financial reports, and this is all also trying to run a business. Right. And making sure my team's okay, making sure that our customers are okay, because, our customers and the gyms have closed, our brand ambassadors, our fitness instructors who are now out of work. I mean, it's a village effort. So like, so to launch the shoe now, I mean, I'm super proud and humbled by the response, because like we have maybe 2,000 left and 7 days to hit that 2,000 to hit our goal. And that's hard-earned dollars that in normal circumstances, I certainly wouldn't take for granted, but especially now it's like, wow, like I have no complaints. I might be tired, but I have no complaints.
Well, and I think, especially for an industry like yours, where, like you say, like a lot of the work is done by trainers in gyms, in environments where people are used to being around one another, and your product is often promoted via word of mouth. There's somebody being like, hey, where'd you get your gloves? Those are cool, kind of thing. Like that sort of impact is palpable. But I think the other thing that's really interesting and it may still be too soon, but did you feel any kind of luxury of time, given that the whole world was on pause? Like, did that give you time to breathe and think, or was it just constant scrambling to figure out like what you were going to do next?
That's a good question. I think we were allowed, I felt our business had some breathing room because our product is not seasonal. So our product doesn't abide by normal fashion seasons. So whether you want a green glove now or a green glove 5 years from now, like it's a color that is not trend based. So and I'm strategically glad for that. That was always a decision from day one. Like I've always said, I don't want to go through fashion trends. I want to stick to what's classic and timeless, whether that's a color choice or just whatever. So that was deliberate. Our business was always direct to consumer majority of the time. So even though, we lost wholesale, which was a giant chunk, like, and I hope that gyms come back. We need them and we care about them, we care about those communities, the owners. But when that disappeared or went quiet, I should say, we luckily could double down on our direct to consumer. And that was always 80 to 90% of our revenue. So we were okay. Like our operations were already geared and set up to handle direct to consumer, no problem. So that was also a godsend. That honestly, I think, did buy time because we could leverage our product for promotional purposes. Our product is very visual. So, we think about social media and like, ooh, where'd you get that? We were able to we can still lean on that. And, I think for our most passionate customers, passionate in their training and all that kind of stuff, I mean, they got creative as soon as they were locked at home. I mean, we have one customer, a male customer actually in New York, who lives in Brooklyn, and on Instagram, he's a Muay Thai kickboxer, Thai kickboxing. He took all of his kick pads and his punch pads, strapped them each somehow on a tree in Brooklyn, okay? Like the different branches, and like tied the pads on the branches and then like around the stump of the tree. And that was his punch bag. It was incredible. Yeah. He could throw uppercuts, he could throw round kicks, you know. And so I think that's the really cool thing that we've seen, like this idea, like the fight never stops, right? That's been our that's been our hashtag, that's been our saying, is like the fight never stops. I mean, there are people, we put up DIY heavy bag tutorial on our website.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Because, you know, think about the iconic Rocky scenes where he's in, you know, the farm or the barn or whatever. He's lifting logs, and it's so classic boxer. You actually don't need a gym. Like, that's the best and craziest part about it. So we've really leaned into that legacy. I mean, even when you think about iconic Muhammad Ali images, I mean, he trains at that cabin, right? He's got that cabin. He trains for every fight. So, you know, the irony is, like, the legacy of boxing never actually needed a facility per se. Like, everything could actually be done outside. So, you know, we've been selling the magic of that legacy a little bit, but also with our own modern twist, of course, which is this, like, you know, underground female fight club, letting out some steam amidst, you know, obviously one of the worst crises of our modern time.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, you gotta chase the chickens and bounce the ball and lift the cart and all that. You can do all that stuff with no gym.
Put the tire, log, pull up on the band.
Let's get into some of the questions from folks here. I'm gonna put this one in a little bit of different context. Granted that we're dealing with crowdfunding during the pandemic, which kind of changed a bunch of stuff for you. But what were there any lessons from your first crowdfunding campaign, Kickstarter campaign, that you really benefited from this time around?
Yes. So I think authenticity, like putting myself out there, talking very genuinely about where we came from, why are we here now with the shoe. I have the shoe if y'all want to see it. This is the official final prototype. And here's the gray one. I'll show the gray one as well.
Can I see the tread again? Oh, cool. So, all right. It's kind of like a wrestling shoe tread-ish.
Yeah. So, but more durable, actually, because it's rubber. And wrestling is, you know, usually like a felt or a cloth material. So, yeah, I mean, so I think authenticity, always, like, putting yourself out there. It's like it's a balance between high gloss, right? Like, you want something with nice production value, but then also, like, you need to put yourself out there. I've started noticing a lot of crowdfunding campaigns, they'll make it a little too professional, if that makes sense. And it's like, you got to just be real with it. I think that's a selling point. And that's between pre-pandemic and also now. I think the other thing that really was beneficial for both campaigns too was doing something called a pre-pledge. So literally Google form that I put together, and I send it to friends and family. And this particular Kickstarter, I sent it also to loyal customers. Loyal meaning they bought from us, say, more than 3 times. Sent the pre-pledge form to get a sense of how much they would be willing to pledge on day one, like as soon as it launched. Because as the founder, you can see very quickly, like, okay, like, so if I put this campaign out there tomorrow, I could probably close 10 to 15 grand, like right there, just between my mom, my dad, you know, the trusty friends and family. And then, like, wow, like, our loyal customers, like, they're in, like, they're down for the fight. So that also really helps. I think the other one is prepping some sort of press strategy. Press not just meaning, like, you know, oh, I want to get Forbes to write about me, but putting together an actual press kit. So, I mean, I could probably teach a whole workshop about this, but a press kit is basically, think of it as literally a Dropbox folder that you can, copy the link and share with any writer, news channel, whatever. But I have folders organized down to a T of like, here's the campaign video, here's the product photos, here's the lifestyle photo. Every photo is labeled with the correct photo credit for the photographer. Here's the one-sheeter. The one-sheeter is so that journalists have no excuse to butcher the language about your brand. Because Society Nine, I've had to call out some journalists for describing us in the wrong way, like, oh, women's mixed martial arts brand, and like this. And I'm like, no, here's the language I provided in the one-pager. This is how we're described, so it has my name spelling. So if they spell my name in an article. So anyway, press kits, that will be the best way for you to get press, because when you're doing cold outreach and you have your like ready blurb of like, hey Rick, like I see that you wrote, this article for the Willamette Week recently. Really resonate with me because I'm a small business owner too. In fact, we actually just launched a new product that you might be interested in. Here's the link. Not sure what you're working on editorially. Guys, I'm literally giving you the playbook here. So this is the exact thing I write, okay? But it's like, not sure what you're writing editorially that might align, but if there's any perspective that I can provide as a fellow small business owner who, insert a line that relates to the article that the writer wrote, happy to provide my perspective however way I can. And here's also the press kit as it relates to the press launch, the end. How many sentences was that? That was like 5 or 6. Writers get inundated with write-up requests all the time. So the best way to come across interesting at all is short and sweet, because they got to gloss through it really quickly. Honest and earnest, and personal connection. That personal connection is like, oh, like Lynn actually reads my articles. Cool. It's not just like hey, I LinkedIn stalked you, saw you write this. Here, the end. A lot of people do that, and it's like you gotta show that you actually did the work to pay attention to who they are. People always ask like, how do you get such good press? Because like we've been very lucky. Every press hit you've ever seen Society Nine get is free. I've never paid for a PR rep. I've never paid for a PR agency. Like whether it's CNBC or Forbes or Fast Company, that came to us, and like I'm very grateful. I'm not saying that boastfully, but I'm boastful in the sense that that's what authenticity can pay for you if you frame your story right, which is why this press kit thing that I keep talking about is so crucial. It forces you as the founder to distill your story very clearly, very directly, so that it's a script. You churn out the same script over and over again, and the more that it becomes ingrained in one writer and that first publication comes out, another writer's going to see it and like, hey, I saw your article in Forbes, like would love to cover you for blah. That's what happened. We had one Forbes article that was written really well. I was really proud of it. And that continues. That was an article in 2016. That continues to get us hits. So, so those would be the 3 things. Authenticity, pre-punch form, so you can see how much you can close in the first day or 2 of your campaign. That will determine the likelihood of your success. And the third one is press kit and press strategy.
That's awesome. Yeah. So just full disclosure, I had grabbed an old photo I had of Lynn to do this original crowdcast. She's like, no, that's not my brand anymore. Use this new photo. And I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. So she's really controlling about that stuff in a good way. And then the other thing, the other thing that you touched on that I don't want people to lose is when you're communicating with a journalist, and we talked with Malia Spencer about this, it's not that journalist's job to write an ad for your company. It's that journalist's job to write articles that are appealing to the people who read their publication. And what you hit upon but didn't say explicitly was you are pitching based on a theme. It's not, hey, here's my product, write it up. It's like, oh, I'm noticing this theme that we fit into that you've already done the research on. So this isn't going to be a heavy lift for you to pursue this story.
I recommend every person who has a brand, whether it's apparel or shoes or whatever, freaking doodad, you need to identify what publication, what's your narrative topics. Every brand has a direct topic and then ancillary topics, right? So like, okay, Society Nine, shoe. It's a sports shoe. It's a boxing shoe, but it's also a crossover shoe. It's hybrid. You can wear it in and out of the gym, which boxing shoes on the market you cannot do right now. And the women in our community, they're like, do I really need to pack another pair of shoes? Like, couldn't I just wear something super cute from the office on a casual Friday right into the gym or, whatever? Yep. So that's the product. Who that addresses, okay, yeah, the women's boxing market, that's a really small narrative. And the publications, not that many, but important, right, for authenticity. Then outside that circle, you have women's sports. Our brand name is Society Nine. It pays homage to Title IX. That's very relevant to women's sports media, okay? So that's like ESPNW. That's the next circle. Then the circle out of that is women in leadership, women in business. So that's things like Portland Business Journal, Forbes, Fast Company, which all still relate to the shoe, believe it or not. Even if it doesn't seem like it, but messaging-wise, it's still related to Society Nine, the brand. It's still related to me, my origin story, and why I was even motivated to start a business, or whether we're making shoes or a boxing glove or whatever. But it still doesn't deviate from the original, that little circle I said, which is like women's boxing. Like, yes, it's niche, it's tiny. But out of that, there's actually bigger messages that are just as relevant and like all part of the Society Nine brand framework that can disseminate into a Forbes story or a CNBC story or the Ring magazine or an MMA blog that's super obscure but totally relevant, right? So then you think about, okay, SEO. That's why press matters, because for SEO, you want high quality press backlinking to your website, and that's how you land on page one without paying a dime. Like for us, women's boxing gloves, if you Google that, like, yeah, before you wouldn't have seen somebody like Society Nine, but we got there within a year and a half, 2 years on paying nothing for SEO just because of press.
Yep.
So
that's huge.
That's why press is actually a lot more serious than people like might not realize. But yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for all those insights. That's super helpful. Next question. I've noticed an abundance of apparel-related startups and entrepreneurs in the mid-Willamette Valley, and I'm starting to do some research to see about building a makerspace or apparel incubator with shared use commercial sewing machines, equipment, those kind of things. Do you think that having such a space would have impacted your startup positively and allowed you to grow faster, or would it have not made that big a difference with what you were trying to do?
Comes down to cost and purpose. So like, I think that's an awesome idea. I think the hurdles with making product always comes down to the prototyping phase. So and that's regardless of whether you're making a shirt or if you're making a shoe. Because first step is you sketch out the idea, right? You sketch out the design, then you tech pack it with, which has the proposed bill of materials and all that stuff, the call outs, it's more technical detail. Then you're going to, in the case of apparel, we're talking about apparel here, I could go into shoes, but since we're talking about apparel, you take that tech pack and that sketch as well. Maybe you have some competitor samples, so at least there's like a touch feel. You take that usually to a prototyper or even a pattern maker who is able to make the pattern itself and then also make a literal prototype off of that pattern so that you have your own tangible, not like a competitor tangible. And that whole process can cost its own money. So I think the question that I would ask if I was building that incubator accelerator idea is, can you, the incubator, create a financially feasible model by which, yes, you hire seamstresses, pattern makers, whatever, you create a package deal by which you can offer to this network and this world that's frothing in your region and say, hey, we actually have a whole stable that can do your prototyping for you, soup to nuts, so that literally it's final sales sample ready. which is a term you may or may not be familiar with. Sales sample ready is basically like, it's like the official prototype. It's the done deal. It's the thing that's gonna go into production.
Yeah.
It's the model. It's the primo model. So you could very well build a financially viable model for the incubator, by which you're like, I have, stable seamstresses, maybe a stable pattern makers, or even hybrid unicorn people who can do both. And you can package deals for specific work. So like if someone's looking to prototype a jacket garment, well, that whole package is going to cost X. A simple t-shirt block is going to cost more like Y. A tank top is going to be whatever. But that can be a financially viable model so that your incubator can make money, right? Because that's the challenge. Rick knows this. That's the challenge with incubators and accelerators, is how do you also make it financially viable, especially since you're talking about an actual maker space. So that's the first thing I think of in terms of value. The second thing that is always a challenge is how to pay for inventory. I find that's a bigger challenge than the mind sharing aspect, because fortunately, even though it's an unfortunate circumstance, what the pandemic has obviously taught us is that you can actually still do a lot and mind share and network and all that stuff remotely. So my concern about a physical space is like, okay, how much value is that really going to provide from like a knowledge sharing standpoint? Because it really comes down to network, regardless of whether it's physically in a space or not. So that's something that I would think about. And I think the other piece of that, semi-related too, is that, aside from like the knowledge resources, going back to what I was saying about inventory, as soon as you get the prototype, I wonder if you could partner with manufacturers, whether they're US or non-US, partner with manufacturers to pre-bake a minimum order quantity agreement. So like, say you as the incubator are like, you know what, we're hosting 5 to 10 up and coming apparel companies. They all cannot order more than 100 units per type, or 200, 300 units per type. If we collate them together, are you, manufacturer A, B, C, D, etc., are you willing to agree to essentially like a consolidated order? Because we're giving an order of 300 units times 5 companies versus one company ordering 1,500, 2,000 units or whatever that they don't know if they can sell, and whatever. So I feel like that would be an interesting model to explore, is like, how can you consolidate what is usually a challenge for most businesses, my business still included, is a challenge, is negotiating for an MOQ, minimum order quantity. That's because that impacts cash flow immediately for any small up and coming apparel startup or product startup.
Yep, that's a great response. Thank you. Yeah, I remember asking Emma at Wildfang something similar, and once she stopped laughing at me, she kind of helped me understand that like it really depends on the stage of company that you're dealing with, because it's not like a co-packer or a bottler where you're just putting ingredients into a thing. There's a lot of manipulation and pattern manipulation and innovation that occurs during that process that you just kind of can't set it and forget it with a sewing machine and expect it to work kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing in the chat thread, people are talking about Dawn at Portland Apparel Lab. I mean, I would recommend reaching out to Dawn. She's been in the game doing this in Portland for a while now. So she would be worth speaking to as well.
Cool. How hard was the visioning, prototyping, and that stuff for the EOS high tops, given that it was your first venture into footwear? And I want to add on to that, was it easier or harder than the initial glove design?
Harder.
Okay.
Harder. Because, I think with the glove, the fit challenge is different, and the size variation is a lot more forgiving.
Okay.
Shoes, less so. Shoes are, I think, even more preferential than gloves. So that was a big risk factor going into it before the sketching even started. So your question was like, what was the most challenging part?
How hard was it visioning and prototyping in this new medium that is footwear that you hadn't explored before? Or did you have resources from the community that were available to help there as well?
Yes. So I didn't design the shoe all on my own. I mean, I think the value that I have is obviously now, at least at the time, 3.5, 4 years of like business and learning customer base, et cetera. And knowing what they wanted, what they were saying they wanted. And also, like, I've been at over 100 gyms across the country. At that point, like, I'd seen what women specifically were putting on their feet, and what was lacking, what was getting busted up. So, you know, I had collected that data over that time, which helped. But going back to what I said earlier, even when I started the business, I'm not a designer. I don't sketch. But I have the pictures in my head. So being in this town obviously is a huge benefit, because the smartest people who are able to do that are in our very backyard. So the person who designed the shoe, his name's Tuan Lee, and he's both a mentor and advisor to me and the business. And so we started collaborating on the shoe together, because he saw a really unique opportunity with the shoe itself, like this idea of a women's boxing shoe, because he's been in the shoe, he's an old shoe dog. He's been a shoe designer for over 30 years, 35 years. And he's like, I've never seen anything like it. This idea of a women's boxing shoe, I've never seen something like that on the market. He's like, I want to take a bite at it. And then on the development side, it was actually Ian Williams at Deadstock Coffee, believe it or not. So for those of you who know Ian very well, because he's very well-known figure in this town, you know, he was a shoe developer and designer before he started the Deadstock Coffee. So, and he's also a very, very close friend of mine. And I said to him, I was like, there's no one else I would rather do this project with. And so we had a chance to collaborate, the three of us, on the shoe. And it was awesome because, you know, I felt like, obviously I was really lucky to receive this information from two people who I consider historians in a lot of ways, like historians in the shoe game. They've seen a lot. They've seen, experienced, and created a lot, I should say. They've invented a lot. And, you know, just for context, Tuan, who designed our shoe, he was one of the first heads of design for Mizuno, if you guys are familiar with Mizuno. And one of the designs that some of you may be familiar with is the Wave Rider, which is Mizuno's most famous running shoe. That was Tuan's design. So, you know, and that's what I mean when I say like the word historian. It's like, you know, these guys have seen what shoes work and what don't in the business. And so it was an honor for me to be like, they were my oracles in a lot of ways, doing this. But credit to myself too, like I knew that there was a gap in the market. Nothing like this existed. And going back to what I said earlier about SEO, right? And how Society Nine, I think, has benefited from a lot of like word of mouth marketing. It's like, it's not just true word of mouth of like one neighbor telling another neighbor. It's also like using technology to our advantage in a way that's actually pretty cheap, which is women's boxing glove as a search term. There was Everlast ringside title, some Amazon listing, and like Dick's Sporting Goods. That was it. And then we came along, and now we're sitting amongst all of them because we were able to win a little bit at that SEO game without a whole lot of costs other than that free press, right? Shoe, same thing. You Google women's boxing shoe, nothing really out there. Now, right now you might not see us on page one, but like obviously the efforts that we're putting out there with the shoe now and stuff, like it's the same roadmap. It's the same strategy that we're employing, and that's only going to better index us on the internet. So the shoe, so that was a strategy. The hardest part though was that, you know, shoes, I call it a Goldilocks problem. I'm a 6.5, 7, I fluctuate. What I deem as a comfortable 6.5 might not be the same as another person's 6.5. So I think when you make product, whether it's software or a physical good, you have to remember that there's going to be a certain point where you have to say, you know what, I think this is about the best I think this is the best it's gonna be for now, and we have to just let it out into the wild. And that's what 2 years of work took. 9 prototypes, many wear testing rounds, several like, why can't we figure this out moments, like, and when I say we can't figure this out, I'm talking about little things that the average person would take for granted and not even think for a second about. Perfect example. So you guys see here these like little divot marks, these little right here. Yeah. So the earliest prototypes had these areas like covered. So this synthetic piece essentially covered all the way up. So there wasn't these like gaps in here. And for the longest time, we couldn't figure out why people were getting hot spots. Like they were getting blisters when they were testing in training and stuff like that. I was also getting like light blisters and stuff. I'm like, this is not cutting it, obviously. But like we knew that we needed the lateral and the inside and outside support. I'm not going to use super techie shoe terms because like the first time I heard them, I was like, wait, what's that again? I had to have Ian Twan repeat things to me a million times because it was like a constant glossary of like, luckily Pencil has a really great glossary if you ever want to learn about shoes. Yes, Steven, I know it's lateral and medial, but I'm not going to use that language here. Anyway, so kept getting hot spots and like, couldn't figure out why. And so like went to Twan, went to Peter, another one of our advisors, tried to address that. And that's what drove Ian and I to literally ask our manufacturer to sample us a version that would make these cuts. And we're talking like, we did several of these cuts different ways to see what would be best. We were afraid of like busting it. In boxing, you're pivoting a lot. So if you pivot hard, I didn't want like Zion Williamson situation where you bust the shoe open. So like, it's the little things that you just don't think about. And like that whole experience was like a experience for me developing the shoe. Because with the boxing gloves, of course, like we had things like hot spots and blowout spots too. Yeah. But like I said, it's a much more forgiving product, believe it or not. But the shoe, oh my God, like it was just like, why? Like, I was like, why isn't this working? And so anyway, but here we are, and it's out in the wild. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, okay, that one. So I guess we answered Annie's question about press. Annie, if I got that wrong, please drop something in the chat and we'll get to it. Next question. Okay, thank you, Annie. I'm sure people are always asking you about your long-term goals, acquisition, etc. Are you able to share a little bit about what you're thinking longer term for Society?
To a degree, yeah. Because you're right, there's some of that stuff I have to keep card close a little bit, but I think the most important thing that the thing that matters most to me since day one of starting this, because it has to be, right? Like everyone has to have a compass. You have to have a reason. Because I'm telling you, if you don't have a startup right now or just noodling on an idea, not sure if you want to start your own company or whatever, you got to really ask yourself, play out in your head every sacrifice financially, emotionally, physically, mentally. You got to really ask yourself, does this idea excite me enough? And does it feel big enough that I'm willing to like really go for it? Because this question comes up, right? Like, what do you want out of this? What is the outcome that you want? And the outcome for me is I wanted to create something that disrupts women's athletics, women's sports, as well as this notion of what women's empowerment looks like. I just happen to choose a lens that's not frequently chosen because honestly, when we started the company, the very first, like the most modern image or figurehead of this new wave was Ronda Rousey. Before that was Layla Ali. And Layla Ali, truth be told, back then didn't have enough good. I'm not saying Layla Ali is not a good boxer. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that the talent pool at that time, questionable. Like, I don't know that, like, Layla Ali was able to be put to the test with the best of the best necessarily because the talent pool wasn't necessarily as big, right? But the women's fight game has grown. And even though our customer base, 90% of them will never hit another person in their entire life, the point is that this idea, this image of a woman hitting anything and gaining her power that way, that is an image that's only now in the last 2 years, I would say, becoming more mainstream and accepted. And there's still contention about it, but I certainly think it's way more accepted and in vogue now than it was before. But what I'm trying to say is that back then when it was only Ronda Rousey, like I still believed in this bigger vision of like, there are more women out there who feel like they connect with Ronda Rousey, even if they'll never fight physically another person in a ring, in a cage. That's not the point. It's that spirit, right? It's that tiger mentality. It's that, you know, I get after everything I go for. I protect my family. I fight for my job. I fight for my salary. I speak, I use my voice. I hold my ground. That type of attitude is so much further beyond, you know, fighting for a championship belt and all that kind of stuff. And that emotion in particular, I knew then existed because I was an instructor. I was a therapist. I was the holder and the keeper of so many of these women's stories in my class day in and day out, when they're talking about their marriages and relationship issues, and they're talking about that awful boss who won't give them their raise because of whatever. And then they're stressed out about their kids and, you know, am I a shitty mom? And like all these things, right? And I'm the holder and keeper of all this information. And so I always knew in my heart that like this business wasn't created just for the one champion athlete, for the, you know, that never motivated me. So the bigger vision for me is that I want to see a world where Society 9 exists for the purposes of reminding women that they are just capable, regardless of what they look like, regardless of where they come from. It's part of the reason why we started donating so early to different youth boxing programs, low-income women's self-defense programs, trans boxing programs. We've done that since day one because this idea of access to power to me is what motivates me to create Society 9 and to keep creating, and also to build it to a place of stability where like we can do it even more freely, where we can give more freely and not even think twice about it because it's cyclical, it's communal in nature. You know, me, customer A, who can afford to pay $89 for a Society 9 glove, I know I give Society 9 $89 for that glove because A, yeah, the quality, B, yeah, it looks cool, C, it feels great, and oh, I happen to know that at least a portion of $89 make sure that someone else who could never afford this glove has a chance to feel what I get to feel every day because I get to afford to pay for any gym membership or even a digital membership, or, you know, like I can afford to train. I have access. And I feel like that's the word of our era, right? Access. Yep. For me, it's through fitness and like, you know, strength or whatever. But as we're obviously learning right now, we've always known, I should say, not just right now, but even with race issues right now in our country and how it's blowing up the way it is, like that speaks to all these other systemic issues. And my very microcosm, the little microcosm that I'm in with Society 9, like I see that very viscerally, even in boxing, right? You go to New York and you've got the bougie boxing gyms that charge $40 per class. And then you've got the gritty gym in, you know, the Bronx that charges maybe $5 for a day pass. I mean, what a weird socioeconomic strata, right? And yet here I am in the middle selling an $89 boxing glove that connects with both audiences. So I have a very, I think a lot about optics and reach all the time. And so for me, the long-term goal for Society 9 is that I just care about creating something with legacy. I care about creating something that I know succeed or fail. It was valuable to someone. So I care less about who the acquiring partner is, how much the acquiring dollar amount is or whatever. And I care more about, did I create something that, yes, didn't exist before, did it make an impact on someone's life, even if it's just for that time frame that, you know, we existed, assuming like there's a possibility that we fail for any reason. That's what has to motivate you as a founder, I feel, because otherwise the risk is too great. It really is. Like the risk is way too, like the risk reward is way too disjointed to not consider when you're doing something like this.
Totally agree. Okay, Lynn, we've gotten through all of the questions, and you managed to give us a master class on crowdfunding, a master class on press coverage, and a master class on brand and mission. So, you know, I guess we did okay for an hour of time. Now is when we kind of turn the tables on you. We have a community of people who are always kind enough to show up, ask great questions, kind of hang out. What can we be doing to help you right now? What would be most helpful for Lynn and Society Nine at this point in time?
That's so nice. What would help me, honestly, and actually give me a second, because I can't remember all the names. I'm serious. What would actually really help me is if all of you could write down these organizations: Black Visions Collective, Black Immigrant Collective, Reclaim the Block, Racial Justice Network, Black Lives Matter Minnesota, CoPal, Take Action Minnesota, Minnesota Voice, NAACP Minneapolis, Black Lives Matter Twin Cities, Communities United Against Police Brutality. If you can donate to any of those organizations to ensure that they're supporting protesters on the ground right now in Minnesota, to ensure that everything from legal representation and bail can be met, that would help me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that ask. That's really kind of you. And I will make sure that, even though I couldn't type really quickly, I'll go back and capture those so they'll all be linked up when people watch the replay of this for folks. Okay. Lynn, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I always learn something during these Q&A sessions. So it's always great to learn from you. So, and thanks for spending your Friday afternoon happy hour with us. We really appreciate it. So.